Hello and welcome to another episode of the Mark Groves podcast. Today I'm diving deep into a very important subject relationally, and that's the father wound. Now, this is part of a series that I'm doing on the father wound, then the mother wound, and then the movement through these thresholds in, healing these wounds and moving into a more mature way of relating. I really wanted to touch on this subject because I have not seen a lot on the father wound, and the more I want to study it and understand it and see how it manifests in adult relationships or even in our relationships in general, I really was seeing that there was a part that I was noticing in these really high functioning relationships, in these really incredible couples, where there just seemed to be a similar energetic pattern that I was witnessing and experiencing. And so in our book, Liberated Love, Kylie and I talk about codependent hooks that live really at the ether of connection, that we don't even know often that we're doing these things. And what we're doing when we're using codependent hooks is we're leveraging power. We don't know we're leveraging power, but we are, because there's a lack of trust. There's a fear of a lack of safety, even though there might be safety present. So this is, kind of like the mind fuckery of it, is that a lot of these things can be happening and they just, these are just my relational patterns. This is just bad luck. This is just, and it's like, no, man, there's so much more guiding what we do in relationship. So if you're feeling confused about some stuff relationally, some of your dating patterns, whether you're a man or a woman, this might resonate. You might find some really interesting things that I speak about that you're like, and stay tuned for the mother one, because that is a fascinating one too. And they can manifest similarly in terms of the relationship patterns and the way that we orient in relationship. So if this is intriguing you, you might be listening to this podcast or watching this and not be subscribed. And if you miss some of these follow-up ones that actually allow you to walk through these processes, you're going to be very sad and you might repeat these relationship patterns. And I want to remind you that if you don't want to miss those things, hit the subscribe button, and on the video, hit the like button, and make sure you share this if this feels like it's resonant for you and you think it can help other people. And when you do hit the subscribe button, that helps support the show, get it in more people's ears, and it makes me very happy. Not that you need to caretake my feelings, but if you wanted to, subscribe. So the father wound is really thought of as like having an absent father, a father who wasn't around, maybe a father who worked too much, a father who's an alcoholic or has emotional disruptions, anger issues. It can also be, you could have had the best dad, but that your dad just worked a lot and just wasn't around, and you just longed more for him. And that's the thing about experiences in childhood, is we can often look back and think, oh, my dad was so great, or my mom was so great, even though as a 5-year-old, you actually longed for your father. You actually wish you spent more time with him, that you wish he was around more, that you had more of his guidance, or he was more emotionally available. And yet our parents might be great people, right? So there's this thought that if I call forward what I know to be true about the experience as a child, then I take them down from the pedestal. And often we put parents on pedestals because we don't want to touch the pain that lives below that. And we don't want them to experience shame or guilt because they're like, I did the best I could, right? When you talk to someone who is exploring their relational patterns and you're like, oh, tell me a bit about your childhood. And they're like, it was great. It's not that our childhoods can't be great, right? It's that there's complexity to our experience. So a childhood can be great and it can still have wounds. And because often our self-perception is that if we didn't have, overt, explicit trauma like abuse, then there's often a thought that we don't have the right to our wound, because other people had it way worse. But for one person, what is a 1 in terms of suffering could be someone else's 10. And this isn't because one person is just overtly sensitive to one aspect of suffering. It's because we all have our own experience. We're all human. You could have a dad who didn't show up to a baseball game, and that for one kid actually not be a memory that really impact them. It could be something totally different. And for someone else, that could be the memory. I looked at the stands and he wasn't there and he said he'd be there, right? So, even looking at that pattern, he said he'd be there and he wasn't there. We're starting to learn not to trust the masculine. Even though our father might be out working, in sort of the traditional example, it doesn't mean we didn't long for him. to play with him, to go on an adventure with him. And where this shows up relationally, like these are the traditional patterns, right, that you see. And we talk about women having daddy issues or men having mommy issues or both, right, that we can have either or both. But we sort of playfully point to these things almost as a way, one, to like bring levity to our suffering, which I actually think levity is really important to our suffering. But then two, to actually sometimes try to infer shame so that people will, you say, oh, you have daddy issues. What you're really saying is, I'd like you to explore your relationship with your father because it seems like it's showing up in your relationships. So for women, and I'm speaking in heteronormative sense here. So for women, when they experience a father wound, they might, perpetually choose unavailable men, and they might choose toxic men. They might also, it'll show up in these like unavailability, choosing guys who are just like not ready quite enough. I did an episode on love bombing where I went much deeper into the love bombing pattern specifically, but that could be the susceptibility to love bombing. It's like this longing for a man to finally show up, to finally see them, to finally witness them, to finally choose them. And what happens when we're dating from the wound of finally wanting to be chosen, finally, is we can get captured by someone who's misrepresenting to get something, by the person who love bombs in order to get power. So you can see how that would show up for a woman who's like longing for her father, because all of a sudden this guy shows up who might not be embodied, might not be integrated, might not be any of those things, but he shows up, he says all the right things. And when we are not grounded deep within ourselves and we haven't resolved our wounds yet, which is the purpose of a relationship, is to bring forward the things that allow us to heal, then we can be captured by that. We lose access, which we might never have had since we were a child. We lose access to discernment. So you think if you can't tell the truth about the story of your experience as a kid, then you don't have access to objective exploration of what's actually going on in your adult life. And what I mean by that is, if as a kid you can't tell the truth that you actually really longed for your father, and even though you loved him and he worked hard to take care of the family, if you can't tell the truth about the longing, then as an adult you don't have access to the full spectrum of your somatic, your body's experience, your intuitive feelings, your accurate exploration of current reality. Because you don't have access to the longing you had. You don't want to tell that part of the story, maybe because you feel bad, maybe it doesn't matter. But it's like you need access to the truth of the reality that you experience so that you can be with reality today. This is true for everybody. This is why we need to explore the truth about our lives, the truth about our childhood, because without exploring the truth, you can't be with reality today. So some of the ways, as I said, we might choose unavailable men, might choose toxic men, might choose, the love bombers. And also, we might become really walled up, right? So go to the opposite direction, really shut down, really get walls, really never allow anyone in because we don't trust men. We don't trust the masculine. So we also might become like, when I say we, women, might become hyper providers, take on that masculine role. And they might also resent that they have to take care of themselves, even though we have to look at the origins of this are actually, they require compassion and they're real, and none of what I'm saying is right or wrong. So like any reaction to this, it's not mine. None of this is right or wrong. It's like, it just is. We can resent that we have to take care of and actually step into the masculine role, step into the providing role fully, and have no access to surrender and openness and love because we're so guarded, and that we couldn't trust the masculine. We couldn't trust men. And so we take on this like rigid role. And then the other side of this is that when we are in relationship with someone and, let's say you decide to have kids or you've had kids and you are being taken care of at that point, there can be a resentment that's very unconscious and a lack of trust about being taken care of. I see this in high functioning relationships where the woman goes on maternity leave or takes time off to take care of the kids or decides to become the caretaker. And they resent that they have to be taken care of because there's still not a healing of probably the matrilineal line of witnessing how provision or providing was weaponized, was used to manipulate, was used to control. So there's a deep lack of trust in someone else providing and taking care of them. Again, no right or wrong to any of this, and no right or wrong to whether men should be providers or women. We're just looking at what is the stories we've been through, what are the stories our bodies have been through, what is the story our lineage has been through. Now, for men, when we have a father wound, that could show up as low self-esteem, that we have a lack of trust in men. We might become promiscuous because we don't have access to mature masculinity. We didn't see a model of treating women with respect. We're chasing worth, we're chasing value. And ultimately, we can become both this hyper masculinized male or this overtly feminized, and again, I'm speaking more energetically, male, the nice guy role, where we lack boundaries or we're so boundaried and we're hyper masculinized. And when I say masculine, again, I'm going with like the traditional perspective of it, where we're like overtly sexual, overtly chasing power, taking steroids, like really in this, like, see who I am, see that I am indestructible. Because deep down, we've never witnessed integrated, mature masculinity who could walk us through this balance that we need. We need both openness and rigidity, right? I think about it as an archetype. We need both the lover and the warrior. If we're too much lover, we got no boundaries. If we're too much warrior, we got no openness. And so this is this balance. And if you think of that maturation process, it's really like, how do I bring into balance? And we're ideally supposed to have adults in our lives and parents in our lives who are already in this flow, but for circumstantial reasons and for all the reasons in the world, which can give us context, we didn't get that. And so this is what we want to do, is we want to like be able to witness, how are these things showing up in my life, and how do I walk myself or through my relationship or through men's groups or women's groups or whatever it is, how do I go through this maturation process or this initiation that allows me to become an adult, that I start to see the value of my wound and actually move through it so I can finally bring healing to my lineage, that I can also finally experience trusting love, surrender to love. So what I just reviewed are the traditional ways that this wound shows up relationally, but I actually want to dive deeper into this wound, into the more high functioning version of it, where it's very subtle, but I see it a lot, and I see it in really great couples. Because let's say you finally resolved that you were dating unavailable men, or you were choosing toxic men, and or as a guy, maybe you were operating with low self-esteem and you were doing this, and this, and choosing your relationship, and now you're starting to find balance and integration, and so you're choosing a good woman. And so what happens is that this is where it becomes much more subtle. And here's what I'll say about the father wound, is that for women, it operates as nothing will ever be enough. And for men, it operates as I will never be enough. So what I see relationally is that you have this high functioning relationship, self-aware women who choose a great man, and yet the man feels like he can never do enough, that there's never enough, even in the act of providing or the act of holding space or the act of, he can sense that deeper down the partner is longing always for more connection, more dialogue, more this, more that. Even when he provides the thing that she says she desires, as soon as she gets it, there's something else. There's like another need. And this isn't because the partner is selfish or desire. It's because there's a lack of trust in the masculine. That if he was finally being received, finally being trusted, then it's what lives beyond the trust and the surrender that the woman is fearful of. For the man, it becomes more about doing. Right? So it's like high achieving, high providing, but nothing is ever enough. No provision is ever enough. We can never reach. So this is why this wound works so well together, because the man is constantly trying to become who he wished his father was. And the woman is constantly desiring that the man be who her father wasn't, like the things that she truly needed from him. But do you see how both are still operating from the wound? Underneath all of this is still the wound. It's still fueling the way that we engage, the way that we relate. So the awareness of the wound is first. It's like, oh, I do notice that there's this subtle energetic. And again, I'm talking about subtle energetics, where it's like, man, like you're two rational, good communicating adults, and you have a great connection that maybe ways, right? Like the desire or the intimacy or that kind of stuff comes and goes because subtly our bodies are not feeling safe, because one, we feel overtly criticized, and the other one feels like nothing is ever enough, like that energetic of like it doesn't matter how much they show up because really haven't resolved the longing I have for my father. And what I see is how this comes forward is these couples just get to a place of frustration where they're like, and the maybe the man finally stands and says, like, this wound doesn't just feel like mine, like this feels like ours. Or the woman says, this wound doesn't just feel like mine, it feels like ours. But it actually requires all healing of all wounds require both people. Now, what's fascinating about this is that it's what lives beyond the surrender, right? Like the standing of the one person that says, I notice that no matter what I do, it is never enough. Familiar words. We've probably heard that in our lives or said those in our lives because it's true. Because what's on the other side is the hook that keeps the men doing and doing more. And again, I'm speaking heteronormatively, but this could be in any relationship pattern between genders. So just like replace whatever you're in relationship with that this relates to and it is resonating, just replace the genders with it. So it's like the hook is that nothing is ever enough. Like I need you to never get to the place where you get to relax, because if you relax and I relax, then I have to go towards the wound that I have unresolved. So it's actually in the surrendering to the fueling of the wound that we finally get to turn towards it. And when I say that, because that can sound kind of esoteric or word salady, is that it's when we finally notice it, call it out as a pattern, which likely will cause us to have shame or guilt or both, and maybe grief and anger, because the shame and the guilt is the recognition that we've been participating in a pattern, and potentially that pattern has been causing our partner to feel like they're not enough. But what happens is once we surrender to the pattern, we then have the anger of the reality of our childhood or of whatever it is of not being met by our dad. And then we get to process that and say to our partner, how do we create something different? I want to finally be able to surrender into connection with the masculine and the partner. I want to finally be enough and not be fueled by this desire to be enough for my dad, to finally like give enough, all that kind of stuff, and to provide from a place of where there's not manipulation, where there's not control. And the way to do this is for us as men to explore how we use money or power to manipulate, to control, so that we feel like enough, so that we can control the relationship, so our partner doesn't leave us, so that they don't have as much access to their voice. Again, it's so subtle. It's not explicit. It can be explicit, and those are like abusive relationship dynamics. But this can just happen on such a subtle level because it's not intentional. It's just from a place of fear, and how as women, you might give up your voice to get provision. All these are such subtle patterns that they're so important to discuss. I'm going to dive deeper into the maturation process of moving through these as both men and women. But what I really want to say is that at the basis for the men is I need to always do more. So the doing becomes the wound's connection between the two. So the way through the wound is that it's no longer about doing, but actually about being. So this recognition that I want him to do more of this, but what you actually really want is for him to be present, for him to be grounded, for him to be trustworthy. And that's why there is value to the trigger in this, because it might be the subtle ways that the man or the woman is not in integrity, and that like there's a lack of deep trust to truly surrender because they don't keep their word or whatever it might be. So there's intelligence to all of it. And for the man, it's about not achieving from the place of finally becoming enough or maintaining safety and control through power or provision. It's about actually just being a good man, finding your integrity, exploring your values, and really, really starting to root into who you truly are, and to stop saying yes to being on the treadmill of the doing, 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 doing. When we finally say no to the wound, we can confront it. And the wound has two people in it. It just always, relationship patterns require one person to say, I no longer want to participate in this pattern anymore. And the other person might get a little reactive at first because this is kind of the leapfrog dance we play relationally. And they finally surrender to, I don't want that either. Okay, what is possible for us if we orient to relationship from that place, and what can we create? Do you see that? What an exhale that is. So we no longer relate to each other from the wound, but from the wisdom that lives in the wound and the possibility. So we now, from an inherited relationship pattern place, are actually moving to the next level relationally. Now, this is going to impact every area of your life. It's going to impact your nervous system. And I'd even say on a subtle level, a lot of this is nervous system work. And so we're going to dive deeper into all of that. I'm going to go into the mother wound next week, so make sure you hit the subscribe button. I'd love to hear your thoughts and feelings and how this might resonate for you, where you think I might be off, where you think I might be onto something, and anywhere you might actually want me to dive deeper into this subject, into some of the nuances of it. So when I walk through how to move through the maturation process, I'm giving you the information that you desire that is maybe more specific for you. And if this subject really resonates with you, we dive deeper into how to move through these processes in my community, which is called Aligned. And you can go to the link in the notes and go sign up for when we open that up again. But we're walking through these processes and doing that as a group, and I do live coaching on the calls. And I look forward to it. And we'll talk soon. Much love.